thrilled to be here. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. Hopefully, there we go. We've got a presentation to go through. And again, what we'll be doing, as Krishna talked about, is we'll be talking about some of our thoughts around how projects deliver products, but it's products that deliver strategy. So thank you for those kind words of introduction. So as I go through this slide, just so we can get a feel for who's here, and there's many of you, which is great to see. If you could just type into the chat box what your job title is, that would be great, so we get an idea of who is attending this session. As I mentioned, we're thrilled to be here. Krishna read off my introduction. The one thing I do just need to add is that I am not here representing the PMI Educational Foundation. I'm here, as he mentioned, with Joanna and I have our company New Gen P, which is thinking about how organizations can deliver on their strategy using products. So we're here to talk about that today. So the words that I say are from that point of view, not from the PMI EF or any way associated with PMI. So as you see here, we've got our contact information. If you have any questions you want to follow up with us on, please don't hesitate to contact us. Joanna, is there anything you want to add to your bio, your form of introduction before I get started?
No, I think Dr. Krishna covered everything. We're good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So with that, let me get going. And I see we've got lots of project managers here, which is great. We're going to convince you that by the end, it's really important that you understand product ownership and that you work effectively with product owners or whatever their job title is in your particular organization. So what we want to cover off today is we'll go through a couple more words of introduction, then we'll talk about the fact that products are failing. And we'll explain some thoughts about why products are failing. We'll then talk about strategy implementation and how many organizations are struggling with how to implement strategy. I'll then turn over to Joanna, who will talk about the product lifecycle and how projects support the product lifecycle. Joanna will give an introduction to the minimum viable product or MVP concept, and she'll wrap up with some comments around how project managers and product owners need to work together and work together effectively as one of these elements of how organizations can achieve success in delivering their strategy. If all goes well, we'll be done with about 15 minutes for questions at the end. As Dr. Krishna mentioned, if you would be kind enough to, if you have questions, put them into the chat box. We'll be monitoring that, and we will have some time at the end to answer any questions that you have. Okay, so the last part of introduction, just whatever our outcomes for this session, we would like you to be able to understand the strategy, our strategy implementation circle of how organizations can implement strategy and how projects and products fit into that. Be able to understand different project execution approaches and how they will develop product development. And then finally, to describe how project managers and product owners support each other and how vital that is. Okay, so let's get on to some of the things about why products are important and thus why projects are important to deliver great products. So one of the things as we are researching our book, we've seen, and anecdotally we've seen, is lots of organizations are struggling with delivering products that are going to be successful. And not only are they struggling to deliver successful products, they're also, in today's world of much more competition and things moving at a faster pace, they really have less latitude for failure. So we've got 3 studies that we've seen here that have talked about how many products are failing. So Clayton Christensen, a professor at Harvard University, who unfortunately passed away in January of this year, has been quoting quite widely that 80% of new consumer products fail. Some places that percentage is actually higher than that. So that's an alarming rate to think about that. Isa Blackburn, who's a professor at the University of Toronto, did a study that shows 70 to 80%, oops, getting ahead of myself, 70 to 80% of new grocery products are fail. Another alarming percentage. And if you think of a company trying to launch a product and figuring, you've got a 1 in 5 chance that it's going to be successful, that's not a very good success rate in today's world. So a couple of people, George Christensen and Stephen Markham, thought those numbers were high, and they did a much larger and more scientific approach to doing a study and came up with 40% of products failing, which is still a huge number. And it's not only products fail, we've seen in some cases a product or products failing can lead to an organization failing. And of course, one of the more classic examples is Kodak, who was just a dominant player not many years ago, 30 years ago or 40 years ago in photography, based on a model of selling film and paper and development services, which all disappeared with the invention of the digital camera. And Kodak declared bankruptcy, is trying to struggle to figure out how to survive as a mere shell of what the company used to be. Something similar happened to BlackBerry here in Canada, and Sears, a large retail store chain in the United States, has also declared bankruptcy because of their traditional bricks and mortar shopping has really been radically changed by Amazon. Okay, so we see this going on, and I'm sure in India you see the same sort of thing happening. Products that were around are now no longer around or failing. Stores that you used to frequent or companies used to frequent suddenly are failing. So why is this? So we're going to talk about, we'll talk about 3 main reasons. They're all somewhat interrelated, and others will have more or less of these, but we'll just talk about these 3 very briefly. So the first one is this idea of diversity and diversification, that suddenly for most organizations, the world is where your customer is. Your customers can be in any place, anywhere around the world. And even with us as publishing our book on Amazon, people bought it in India, right? We're here in Toronto. Go back a few years ago, that was virtually impossible to do. Now we can sell products and services to customers anywhere in the world. But it's not only that, it's also the fact that, especially here in Toronto, as we were talking about before we started the webinar, was the fact Toronto and many great cities in the world are so diversified in the ethnic groups in that particular city. So your employees are going to become more diversified, as well as your customers. So dealing with this is going to be a huge issue. And not only the fact that your customers are diversified, so are your competitors. You're no longer competing with a company around the corner. You're competing with a company that could be anywhere around the world. Of course, a lot of this has been enabled by technology, in particular disruptive technology. I already mentioned the Kodak example with the digital camera coming in and disrupting Kodak's technology they had and what their company was based on. Of course, the interesting trivia fact was that Kodak invented the digital camera. But photography is only one item of where this disruption has come in. There are many others. Uber and the taxi industry, Airbnb and the hotel industry, right? We have this whole idea of the internet coming in as well, being very disruptive. And so lots of examples of this disruptive technology. And then out of the disruptive technology, we end up with having new business models, right? If you think about Uber going into the taxi business, right? But if I was to open up a taxi company, I'd have to buy cars, I have to hire drivers, I have to get a dispatch system, I have to get a call center to take calls, all this infrastructure in place. Uber went in and said, I just get an app, right? I have an app, people can book their car, match it up with a driver who's interested in taking them. The app will take care of payment. It's much simpler, much more different business model. Don't have to have employees, apps are independent contractors. So we're seeing increasingly, we're getting these different business models that are coming up out based on technology, based on diversification, based on ingenuity and creativity of organization, which are changing the way things are being done. And the challenge organizations have is, are their products able to adapt to changes in customers coming from all over the world, in the changes in technology, and in the different business models? Kodak wasn't able to. Okay, so as I talked about this, and if you can think about from your company, and again, just type in the chat box here, which one of these three do you think are the most impactful for your organization? Is it the diversity that you're facing? Is it the technology, disruptive technology, or is it new business models? So if you can just type that in the chat box and let's see where groups are, that would be great. While you do that, I'll keep going ahead here so I don't cut into Joanna's time. Okay, so when we think about what we're faced with, why are we faced in this particular situation? Now, certainly there's no doubt about it that COVID-19 is accelerating why this is happening. But I will believe, and I'll argue, that the roots of this go back to over 500 years ago, if to think about what happened. So what happened about 500 years ago? Well, it was in the late 1400s. So 550 years ago was the invention of the printing press, which created the Renaissance that we went through in the 1500s. So there's an argument that's been made, and the book title has slipped my mind, that with the advent of the internet in 1992, we have started a new age of the Renaissance. That suddenly, that the ability for someone to communicate with individuals through the internet using email, for us, as an example, for UGNP, to be able to put up a website that you can go and view now, was not able to be done, before 1992, right? I had to send posters or flyers or direct mail or something like that to you, but I can do this on the internet now. I can share my thoughts with you as I'm doing now in real time when you're halfway around the world. Never was that possible without the internet. So this is changing the way we communicate and the way we share information, just as the printing press did some 500 years ago. Second is this idea of the industrial age 4.0, and the graphic here is trying to show this. So starting back in the 1700s, we learned how to harness power from water or from steam to help us do some heavy lifting that was normally reserved for either person power or using animals to help us out. So this allowed us to start creating manufacturing plants. By the late 1800s, we had gotten to the idea of starting to create mass production. Henry Ford and the producing a production line to create cars. This started becoming a lot more used and much broader use of how to do this. By the 1960s, right, robots started to be to start replacing the human power on these mass production lines. So with the internet and the Internet of Things, these robots are now connected together and can talk to each other. Right? So Henry Ford has this famous line when he started producing cars with his Model T, which you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And that was what the basis was to do the mass production following the scientific method: streamline, consistency, standardization. But with robots now, you can go and customize how you build your car. And I guess if you're fortunate enough to be able to afford to buy a really high-end car, they'll even let you go over to their German plant and watch you build your car based on the specifications that you have, because that can be shared with the robots, who can pick up the appropriate pieces and put them together in the right combination. And we can see this coming more and more, especially with artificial intelligence, that we're moving to a new industrial age. And in fact, if anything, COVID-19 is accelerating this and potentially could be adding into the fifth industrial age, or really solidifying this idea of how work is done, as more and more of us are having to learn how to work from home and work with our coworkers differently. The last trend of what's happening in the workforce today, which is causing some of this development, these disruptive forces happening and challenges happening to products, is what we'll call the fourth-generation workforce. It certainly has not been uncommon to have multi-generations, but this is in many parts of the world, this is where this first time we've had 4 generations, as what we collectively call the baby boomers, those who were born after World War II, are still in the workforce for a variety of reasons and not getting out. I mean, certainly I'm in that generation, and by my age, my parents were both out of the workforce and enjoying retirement because they thought they were both going to be dead by the time they were 70. And my dad lived to be 88 and my mom's still going strong. So, you know, my generation saying, why would I stop working now? I'm still having fun and I've still got many years ahead of me. But the Gen Zs, those who are now approaching 25 or their mid to late 20s, are starting to enter the workforce, and we have the millennials and the Gen X's in the middle. So we have 4 generations, and each of these generations have very different outlooks on the world, very different values. So this is also what's causing problems of why these challenges are happening.
And I just wanted to add something, Peter, there, that I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying that they actually have 5 generations in the workplace. So
Right.
they had somebody born in 1944 still working. And it's fun to watch that because you have so much diversity.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, the maturists, as they talk about those people, are still, some of them still in the workforce. So what are we, having those pre-comments, what are we faced with? Well, organizations, many of them know they have these challenges and they document them in their strategic plan, but they have to implement this their strategic plan. And they have basically 5 challenges to do so. So the first is a culture. So that you have to change the culture, have to have people understand why they have to do things differently. Some of the reasons I just explained. Second is the organizational structure has to change to be a lot more willing to adapt to a world that's changing quickly, and an organized structure that's willing to support the delivery of new products or enhanced products that will help the organization get their benefits. Third is focus. There's so much going on in this world, so much that can be disruptive, that we have to be able to stay focused on our strategy and not get disrupted by a little trinket or bauble, that shiny bauble that's on the side. Fourth is ability to execute. Of course, this is where project management comes in. Once we decide on what the products are that we need to be in place to deliver product or service to support our strategy, we have to be able to execute. And last is we have to be able to change our organization, but also to help our customers change to do things in a different way. So these are the 5 challenges that we have. So what we're suggesting here is to look at what we call a strategy implementation circle. So this will start with the idea organizations develop a strategy, right? So done very well. Then you, from a strategy, this is a mission and vision where you want to go. Then you do your strategic objectives. So thinking about in 5 years, what do you want to achieve? And these objectives, we generally want to make sure they're specific and measurable, actionable, time, reasonable, or relevant, I should say, and time bound. From the strategic objectives, we start developing projects that will deliver products. So if we want to increase our revenue, we're going to have new products or enhanced products to get more money. Well, how do we do that? We do that through having projects deliver products. The products are going to deliver value to customers. So customers are going to buy or use our products based on the value that they receive from it, right? The customers will give us feedback. That feedback can lead us to go back to put more features or enhancements into our product, but their feedback will also allow us to see if we achieve our benefits. If we want more revenue, customers will give us great feedback, which will allow us to increase sales so that we will then be able to get our benefits or not. And of course, that will feed back to our strategy, which will then tell us whether we need to update our strategy or not. So let's see how this will work as an example. So I've got an example of a German company called Infarm, and their founders back in 2012 had this idea of, can we have what they called a vertical farm, and you can see it in the picture on the left-hand side, that we can use in urban centers so that we don't have to use up valuable farmland. You don't have to use up the cities, can feed themselves without having to rely on farmland and take up natural space and convert it into farmland. So, and then, we want to be able to use less water using hydroponic growing techniques. So they started off with this as a product, and their strategy was to feed cities of tomorrow by bringing farms closer to the consumer. They came up with an objective in about 2014 or 15 to install these farms in 100 stores within 3 years. So their project to support that strategic objective was to install farms in Metro grocery stores in Germany. Now, the Metro grocery store chain is one of the largest in Europe. It's based in Germany, so this was going to be a big coup. They have lots and lots of stores that they would have. So their focus was to get into 100 of these stores in Germany. They had their product as a minimum viable product, so they need to enhance it to make sure it was stackable, that it was modular, so you could have one or you could put multiple of them together. They need to make sure it was climate controlled. And in particular, they needed to make sure that they would be able to have an app that could monitor and report based on how these units were doing so that they work with the cloud. The value that they would deliver to the customers who could come into the store was that they could buy local food, as you can see in the picture, that's grown literally right in the store. But the other value they provided to both Metro as well, Metro was remote monitoring of these, so they didn't have to have someone checking all the time in the store. It was scalable because they were modular, they could add. And they provided an access to a variety of different seeds so that the stores could customize what produce they grew in their store to the needs of their customer. So what did they end up as a feedback? Well, they ended up having the store ultimately in 200 stores, the Metro stores in Germany. And when I checked on LinkedIn recently, there was over 14,000 people following them on LinkedIn and Instagram. In the case of Instagram, interesting trivia fact, having 14,000 followers puts you in the top 10% of Instagram followers. So that's what Joanna says we have to aim for. And of course, their benefit that Infarm received was that based on their success in Metro, they were able to raise $100 million in venture capital to help expand their company to be global. So with that, now I will turn over to Joanna, and she'll continue to talk about this idea, the product lifecycle, and how as project managers, we can support organizations in their product lifecycle.
So maybe I should share. So if you want to give me, and then while I share, there is a very interesting question there about program management. And I think we will touch on that as we go through this presentation, because that's a very good topic. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yes, you just have to do presentation mode, Joanna. Yeah. And if I can do a blatant promotion here, Joanna and I think we've got the wrong screen being presented, Joanna. This is your display view.
Oh.
So we've got, just as a blatant promotion, on July 9th, Joanna and I are doing a presentation on projectmanagement.com. Some of the elements of this, the one we're doing here today, we did an early one in March, but the one on July 9th, we're going to be talking about the four P's of project management, which is going to be around product promotion. Well, sorry, excuse me, I'm going wrong. For 4 P's of project management, which we said are portfolio, program, and project, and product is being the fourth one. Okay.
Am I sharing the right screen? Because
you're not sharing the right screen.
Okay. I think you're probably gonna have to share because I cannot figure out how to get to the right screen.
Okay. So just stop sharing and I'll put mine up.
Yeah, and hopefully we can answer that question, because one of the things Peter talked about was like how organizations and products especially fail, and then the challenges that organizations have with strategy. And the first thing we should focus on is think about the big picture. And the big picture is the product life cycle. So it's a bigger picture than the project, because we all know that the project is a temporary endeavor. So because it's temporary, it's just a limited period of time. So if we think about the product life cycle, that's a bigger life cycle to think about how we develop that product to be successful for your organizations. And this is where program management gets to play a role, because in a product life cycle, you have multiple projects. And those multiple projects, because they are related to the same product, will be combined into programs. Yeah, we don't see it, so we have the same.
Sure, can you please make me presenter so I can share my screen? Okay, good. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah. Peter, you are the presenter now.
There you go. We're done. We're ready to go.
About that, technicalities. So you can see here, so now let's focus on some of the tools and techniques on how to make organizations achieve their strategy and make sure that their products are successful. So first of all, as I said, focus on the big picture of the product lifecycle. This is the traditional product lifecycle. This is a Boston Consulting Group diagram, and they put it together many years ago, thinking that there is a linear progression of the product, that there is a lot of predictability in the world. They can actually predict what's going to happen next. So this linear life cycle of a product basically starts with an idea. So you introduce an idea into the market. So that idea becomes a concept, and then it grows. You add more features to it as it becomes, a product that you can actually cash on. So those are the cash cows. You see all those products out there, from Apple, their iPhone 10, now iPhone 11 coming into the market. You see how they evolve. They add all these features, and then they release them, and then they make most of the money with them. And then after that period of maturity, all they do, because another products are coming along, they have to decline that product. So think about, iPhone 5 and 6 and 7, they are right now declined and retired because other products came along. Now in the next slide, Peter and I looked at this traditional product lifecycle and said, you know what? This life cycle is not adapting to the changes that we have right now in outside in the market. And especially with COVID-19, this is great to think about. How do we think about this product and our organizations from a change management perspective, because change is everywhere. So we realized that there are 3 buckets in the product life cycle. There is the first bucket when you have an idea, but you have to match that idea with the customer problem, because you cannot launch something unless you resolve a customer pain. Then once you figure that that's a customer problem that you can solve, you have to validate that on the market. So how do you do that? By creating the minimum features that you can deploy to the market to get the feedback from the customer that Peter talked about in that circle. So you have those set of features that you can put in the hands of the customer. The customer will provide you the feedback, and you would understand if that feedback is relevant and if the customer will accept your product. And then you actually start executing. So the agile execution is just one part of the product lifecycle. So this is where you start thinking about projects and programs, and you execute within that bubble. So this was the high level. Now let's go into the details to see what's underneath all these three phases. So in the first phase, as I said, you start with an idea, but as you start with an idea, you're thinking about the value. So how do you do that? The first thing you would want to do is to do a value proposition canvas. And of course, we can teach you how to do that. So that value proposition canvas, it's matching your product with the customer. So basically you identify those features and the benefits and the user experience with the customer needs and pains and fears and wants. So now you have both in parallel and trying to fit with each other because the customers will buy what they need. So that's why you need to develop those set of features that customers need. Once you develop that value proposition and you match the product with your customer, you need to look into solutions. And the solution experimentation or analysis, it's an expensive phase. So that's why you want to think about value first. As you develop the solution, of course, you want to deliver it to the market. So this is when the market validation comes into play. And then you think about those minimum features that you want to put in the hands of the customers. You want to do a proof of concept to prove that the solution that you have is working. And then you do that through a prototype. So basically have an application of some sort or some sort of a demo for the customers to touch and to work on. And then the agile execution part is a big part because this is when you start developing your product, your actual product that will go to a lot of customers, not just the ones that you want to validate your product. So you basically go through iteration planning. So as you do iteration planning, you're thinking about what is going to be in the first iteration, the second iteration, the third iteration. You do a lot of planning in Agile. I know a lot of people say that Agile doesn't do planning. They are so wrong. You do so much planning in Agile. Every iteration, you do an iteration planning. And then you define and you build and then you release to your customers. And you probably know that everything is iterative. So that means it is planned in small chunks of work. So that's about iteration. You just go small and then you develop from there. You get customer feedback, you incorporate, and you redevelop the feedback that you receive. So in the next slide, we're going to show you an example, and this is Zappos. So I don't know if you heard about Zappos. Zappos was a company that was bought by Amazon in early 2013 because they were very successful. So they were the first company thinking that they could sell shoes online. So if you can believe that. The owner and the founder had an idea that he spent so much time going and buying for shoes. He thought, why not just searching on internet and buying from there? And the big question would be, what about trying? What about the usability? What about all these things? So everybody around him told him that that was a bad idea. So he thought about the value and was the saving time. And then he started creating a website. And on his website, he had all these pairs of shoes. But in the inventory, he only had one pair. So he started with one pair of shoes. And then he started putting out there for people. And he got so much, so many customers and so much confirmation from customers that they would buy the shoes online that he created this big company called Zappos that actually sold millions of pairs of shoes and at some point had 2 million customers in their database. And that's why Amazon bought them. Okay, so next, we have a poll for you, and you can put your responses into the chat. Which product development approach does your organization use? And we want to think about what we went through, traditional, iterative, hybrid, none of them, or you just don't know. So you're thinking, like what we explained here from a traditional, as you develop that linear product, or you iterate a lot as you develop your products. Perfect. And I think, Peter, you can monitor the chat as I go ahead. I'm going to have to switch the slide.
Sorry, I was watching all the hybrids coming in. Sorry.
That's okay. So now, when we think about that agile execution, so that bubble in the agile execution, and when we talked about iteration planning, this is how you do an iteration planning. So basically, you build a backlog of features. So all of your features will be there, and we use an example of a travel website. So basically, you have to have a login, logout. You have to have display trip. You have to have print trip, update, share, send alert. All these features will be defined by a product person, either a product owner or a product manager. In some organizations, the project manager defines these features with the teams or the business analysts, so they don't have a product person in there. Or they get somebody from sales or marketing or so on. But you need to have a backlog of things. So this is a great practice to have all these features come together and put them there. So the moment you have them there, and you can end up having 100 features in this backlog. We only have 6, as you can see here. Then you start thinking, what should we do first and why? So the biggest question is why. So we're thinking that you cannot do anything with a website if you cannot log in, log out. So that should be your priority, because you want people to be able to connect to get in there into the website. So, but basically you are forced from a technology perspective to develop that feature first. And then we're thinking, yeah, once you get in there, what's going to be the first thing that will show up? Well, you'll have an itinerary of your trip, so you need to display that trip. And then one of the basic features that people want would be to print that trip, because they will need it for customs, they will need it to show when they go there to the hotel and so on. So these are the main 3 features. Is this enough to go out there to your customers and test? And the answer could be yes, because you want to test that they can log in, log out properly. So it's keeping that information safe. You want to make sure that they have access to the entire trip inventory itinerary, and then they can do something with that itinerary, which means that it has the print feature. I'm not done. You have to go back. Thank you. So you can see here, you will group those features in iterations. Now the question would be, when do you release to your customer? Can you release in iteration 1? I would say by looking at it, yes. So at the end of iteration 1, you can actually put a release diamond there and say, I want these 3 features to be released to my customer. And then you have the iteration 2 and iteration 3. So that could be a debatable thing if you want to release iteration 2 separately, or you want to wait until you finish the send alerts feature. And you can release 2 and 3 together. So this is how you do your planning from an iteration planning perspective. So in the next slide, we're going to talk about the MVP, because this is very important. So that iteration 1, as I said, it could be releasable. So you can have a ready increment that you can deliver out there to your customer to test. It needs to meet this MVP concept. So it's the minimum viable product or the minimum features that you can deliver to your customers to test. And if we're thinking about this example, and this is a famous example, and the requirement here was that we need a transportation vehicle. So the customer comes to you and says, I need a transportation vehicle. They don't tell you, I need a car. So when they tell you I need a transportation vehicle, in the traditional model, which is the orange one, people will start already documenting the car, the requirements for a car, because in their mind, a transportation vehicle will be a full developed car. In the agile approach, we're thinking, okay, so what's the minimum feature that we can start to get this person from point A to point B? Because they need a transportation vehicle. That's all they need to be able to move from one point to another. So, of course, the first thing could be a skateboard. The second could be a bicycle. And you can see you can evolve that bicycle into a motorcycle. And then maybe the customers, you give them a motorcycle, they would be happy because that's all they need. They don't need a car. So that's the whole concept here, to gradually go and add features to your products until your customers will tell you, that's enough. I've had enough of features, and now I am happy, I'm satisfied. Or you can go on, if you see that your customers are not very happy, as you see in this picture now, you give them a car as the fourth release. And then they may not be happy even then, so you can give them an electric car later on. So you add those features on, and you make that product that customers love gradually. That's the whole concept of it. And the benefits of this MVP concept in the next slide are very, very visible, because first of all, you set up a goal, you set up a purpose, and you say, we need to get there. We need to develop a transportation vehicle at the end of this that customers love. There are all these benefits that we talked about that you want to validate. Does it meet the customer needs? Will the customer pay for what we're developing? Then you do optimization, because you avoid all the wasted features. In my experience, as we develop products, and our business owners or our business partners will come and tell us, they would need everything. At the end, 65% of the features developed are not being used. And we know that that's happening everywhere. So you avoiding to build all these features from the beginning that the customers will not even touch. They won't use. So all you do is get feedback that they're using it. And then you acquire early adopters. So you have those customers and you can get feedback. And then you keep the focus on that value proposition that we talked about. So those are the main characteristics. Okay, so in the next one, so we thought about your audience and we thought about who you are, and I saw that you are project managers and product managers and program managers. So now what we would do is that we will focus on who is developing the product lifecycle, and we know that the project manager and the product manager, they need to work together hand in hand. And whether it's a program manager, because they think about the full view, or a portfolio manager, these are the two main roles that we identified, as working together. And in the middle, you can see there, you have the team and the product. So it's a partnership between the two roles to make sure that you care about the team and the team is motivated to do the work. And then you build the product that customers love. So on the right side, so you can see the project managers and their responsibilities. And I know you know that, but in the end, as these two roles work together, you can see the project managers, they communicate and they take care of the project stakeholders. The product owners, they take care of the customers. So they have a direct link or a direct relationship with the customers. And this is very important, because they would feed that feedback back into the product, back into the team, so they can develop that. The project managers, they look at the project lifecycle. So as a project manager, I want to make sure that my project lifecycle from initiation to closing is done properly. As a product owner, you're looking at the product lifecycle that we talked about. So it's before initiating the project and after initiating the project, because we know a lot of projects that have benefits, they don't realize the benefits when the project is going on. So they have to transfer those benefit realization plans into the hands of somebody, and that would be the product owner. Then the project managers, they look at the project objectives. And that's, we all know, it's the triangle between the cost, the scope, and the schedule. On the product owner side, we look at the customer value and those benefits that we need to obtain to make sure that we meet the customer needs. Do we deliver value to customers? Would they love what we deliver? That would be the questions. And then the project managers manage the risks for the project, whereas the product owners, in contrast, they manage the features and the benefits that we talked about. So they have to continually realize those benefits. So you can see the two roles coming together. And we get a lot of questions from people. How do these roles work together, or whether there is a future for the project managers? And we say yes, they work together in partnership. I used to be a project manager in my early career. Then I moved into a product management role because I wanted to develop products and I wanted to own them. And I wanted to make sure that at the end of the day, I could say, hey, I developed that product and those customers love it. So that was just my journey. So I wanted to do more. Okay, so the last slide, we want to leave you with a thought. And that thought is that projects deliver products. So you can see that those projects are inside the product lifecycle, and products are aligned with the strategic objectives. And with that, I will pass it to Peter.
Thank you, Joanna. And we're running a little bit late, so I don't want to take too long on this, my last couple of slides, just so we have some time for questions. And I see some questions that come in the chat box. But what I wanted to just end off with is to talk to you about that as we look at the PMI talent triangle and look at this business and strategy at the bottom of it, that is becoming increasingly more important for project managers and program managers to know more about products, how products relate to organizations' strategy and delivering strategy. So with this, as we mentioned earlier in the introduction, we have our book, Gen P, New Generation of Product Owners Who Care About Customers. We've also developed an online course which has 8 modules in the course. We have 4 sections in each of the modules, which each one with a template that can help you understand more about what it means to be a product owner, get you as a project manager to think more about the product of your project, what's being trying to be achieved from this. And during the course, Joanna and I are available once a week to help out if you have any questions, and we offer a certificate of completion as well as a badge that you can put in your LinkedIn profile available to you. And we're making this available to you for the special price of $100 US. It's now available normally for $499 US, so a significant discount for you. If you just take a picture of the QR code, it will take you to the page where you can sign up if you want to register, or you can just go to our website. You can see that at the bottom of the screen, newgenp.com. newgenp.com to get more information, or you can email us. So this offer is, of course, available till July 2nd, so a week Friday. This week, no, 2 weeks today, sorry, a week today. Where's the time going? Anyway, thank you very much for your time and having us come and talk to you. We really appreciate so many of you showing up and an opportunity to share our thoughts. As we mentioned, please type in your questions into the chat box. We have a few minutes to answer them. We'll be glad to do so. There is one around the slides. I'll certainly send the slides off to Jack Shore to post however he will do, or you can just email me or info@newgenp.com and we'll send them to you in PDF format. Joanna, I saw when you were talking, there was a question earlier on about the impact of COVID-19 on the way businesses and companies are thinking and about how they're dealing with the work they have to do. Some companies slowed down, some are actually speeding up. Do you want to just chat a little bit about that while we wait for other questions to come?
Stephanie, and I think we chatted a little bit with Dr. Krishna at the beginning, because we see that those organizations who had a flexible strategy and a flexible implementation model, more iterative, they could implement these changes from COVID-19 faster. Because especially here in Canada or North America, we are receiving information about the changes that we need to do every day. So the businesses, they need to react very fast. One day, the prime minister will come and say, tomorrow we'll open the business, or tomorrow we'll close the business. What do you do? So if you have a more flexible execution model, like an iterative model, then you can incorporate those changes easier, because your people are used to incorporating changes all the time from the feedback they receive from the customers. So they will just adapt. They will look for solutions right away, and they will say, okay, no problem, we can do something like that. We've seen in Canada some beer companies, instead of producing beer, they started producing sanitizers in a couple of days. So that was a great example of companies adapting. So that's what these models are teaching you to do, to be open, to be flexible, and to look for those opportunities to always improve. I don't know, Peter, if you want to add something to that.
No, they mentioned in the question about, way of thinking our brains, and I just have to, we do have a bit in the book around the left side and the right side of the brain and how you have to use both in balance. I think it's really this idea, as Joanna mentioned, how the organizations have to be creative and be adaptive. That's what's important. Okay, I've got another question here, Joanna, on your slide around scheduling in the iterative releases. The modules or works that have a greater work are released in the first release. Is it a good option to focus on tasks that need more effort to be rolled out first?
This is a great question. I think we're falling into that trap all the time. The one thing you have to think about is that you don't have to release every time you do something. So you're only releasing when you are ready. When the product owner will tell you, okay, now we can release it to the customer. But that means you can actually start working on those items that require more effort. So what I did with my team, as they told me, this feature will take us 3 months to do. So we will look at that feature, and first of all, we would decompose it. So we would break it down and see if we can actually break it down. And then if we couldn't break it down and it was like a big feature, you start working on it. So it may go through the span of 2-3 iterations, that's okay. And then whenever you're ready to deploy, you will deploy it, whatever iteration you are in. But the first thing you want to do is start decomposing, see if you can decompose. So one of the features that we did was the electronic signature, big feature. So we said, first of all, we wanted to do a proof of concept to see if it's working. The second of all was like, can we break those features to say, oh, you can sign, but then the filing can be developed in the next iteration. So we would only try the signing first, but then the filing of the signature will be done in the next iteration. So that's how you decompose these features. And I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna and Peter. Thank you very much for the information-packed session. And may I invite Akhila Gauri Shankar, VP Finance, for the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Jay. Peter and John, it was a great session for sure. Everyone will agree with me. It was indeed a right way of projecting how a project manager and product owner should get in touch to get the right products in an iterative manner, as otherwise we'll not be able to sustain in this ever disruptive world, ever changing world. Thank you so much. And another special thanks to you all for this great offer for your course. I'm sure everybody would have taken note of that, or the email ID on info@newgenp.com. For sure, many of us will be taking making good opportunity of this. Thank you so much, Peter and John, for coming over and then giving us a very informative session. It was great that we all understand the importance of being seeing the big picture and then getting the small values, which minimum MVPs, minimum viable products, to the market, and so that we can be sustainable. Thank you so much. And for the PDO claim, I'll just mention that because I will not be able to share the screen. It is, if you all can note it, C316 TJDEG1. I repeat, C316 TJDEG1. Thank you so much and have a safe day. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna, Pedro, once again. We'll connect soon.
Yes, and we will be actually getting the slides from Peter and Joanna, and we'll be sharing to all the participants. And I will be thanking again from the PMIK chat for a wonderful session.
Kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you.